So first, the big headline. A census is definitely on the horizon in Modi 3.0, but the big question remains, will it be a caste census? Now, the government, according to top sources, is still debating whether to include caste as a column in the next census. But what sources tell us is that no final decision has been made. Now, remember, ever since Karnataka and Bihar conducted their caste census, various opposition parties, including leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi, have made it their rallying cry. In fact, in his recent visit to the United States, Rahul Gandhi declared that the caste census is now an unstoppable idea, arguing that it is essential to understand the integration of backward castes and the social and economic standing. He's gone a step further, saying that he'd only consider scrapping quotas when India becomes a fair and equitable country. What the definition of that remains to be seen. So why has the caste census become urgent now? There are several reasons which come to the mind. We at Mirror Now have broken it down into 4 reasons, 4 imperatives to be precise. First off is the social imperative. There is a basic element to understanding the fact that caste still plays a foundational role in Indian society. You go to a matrimonial website, you will see categories based on caste. You go to elections, you will see elections fought in votes being given based on the caste of the candidate. Then there's a legal imperative in that current quota policies cannot be effectively implemented without caste-specific data. For instance, there is 5% quota to SCs. Are SCs still 5% of the Indian population? That we don't know. And then there is the administrative imperative. It helps prevent wrongful inclusion or exclusion of caste groups from various schemes. So the contest as to whether a caste deserves quota or not, we'll get to know. And finally, there is a moral imperative, because the fact still remains that all sections of society, all power brokers of society, whether it be government, whether it be bureaucracy, even media houses, they're all still dominated by upper caste and even certain powerful OBC groups. In fact, it's not just Rahul Gandhi who's been pushing for the caste census. Even the BJP's ideological parent, the RSS, also several NDA allies have voiced for support for a caste census. The RSS has emphasized that caste is a sensitive issue, and therefore this census should be handled with care. It should not be used for politics. It should be used for prioritizing welfare. Even key NDA allies, I'm going to name 3 of them here because they are very critical to the survival of the Modi 3.0 government. They are the TDP, the JDU and the Jan Sena. They're all backing the move. So the writing is inevitable on the wall. But the idea isn't without its critics as well. There are 3 reasons why perhaps having a caste census is not a good idea. Some argue that counting caste could deepen social divides, reinforcing casteism instead of curbing it, because it reinforces caste into your psyche. There's also the administrative challenge. What exactly is a caste? What is a subcaste? And when do we know when something is a caste, when something is an ethnicity? It can get very, very tricky. And then a caste census could lead to more competitive demands for quotas, because remember, the larger idea still was at some time in the utopian future, we get rid of caste. So there's a lot to look at. Let's look at the historical backdrop. Caste data was always a part of the census when India was under the British rule. From 1865, which was the first census, to 1931, caste data was collected. However, the categorization of what was a caste was highly skewed. In 1941, caste data was collected, but it was not published because the entire census operation was hampered by the Second World War. From 1951, which was the first time independent India had a census, to 2011, which is the last time India has had a census, only SC and ST census data were made public, which means you can only know the number of scheduled castes, the number of scheduled tribes in which state, and their literacy rate, and so on. As for 2021, the caste census could not take place due to the ongoing pandemic. The pandemic has been long gone. However, we have not seen a caste census so far. But will we see it soon? The debate is wide open, but one thing is clear, it's not a debate that's going to die down anytime soon. And so, let me bring in my guests who have been waiting for me very patiently. We have RSS Bhattacharya, leader of the BJP, Manish Barriar, political analyst, Madhavan Narayanan, senior journalist, and Pushparaj Deshpande, spokesperson of the Congress party. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining me at this point. Let me first start off with Manish Barriar, political analyst. Manish, why suddenly do we see these rumblings coming in from senior sources within the government, which we can't record because they've been told to us off record? Why are we suddenly seeing the growing reality or admission of reality by the government that we may finally see a caste column in the census. First, the admission coming in that there will definitely be a census before the current government finishes its term, and then the possibility that there will be a caste factor in it. Is it an admission of the realities that the RSS, the opposition, the allies are all in favor, and there's only so much that the BJP can reject it for so long?
So good evening to you and good evening to my co-panelists. So I would not call it an admission. I would say that, BJP has always been a party that has really championed the cause of every group, be it social or gender or religious groups. And wherever they have found that there is a weakness in a certain set of people, they have already worked towards the growth and development of that group. Having said that, you can take an example of Bihar. In Bihar, BJP strongly endorsed caste census, and caste census did come out, and I think BJP took the lead. In fact, all the political parties there were unanimous, and it was passed in Vidhan Sabha twice. So I would not really agree that the government has been opposed to this idea of caste census. I would say that it's a humongous task, and there was some kind of a consensus building which was required, both as far as the opposition and allies are concerned. And once there is a unanimity of thought, I don't think it is a bad idea at all. But the Bihar result of caste census that was published, which Congress government did not do when it came to Karnataka, it shows that this entire caste census is more political. It has more of a nuisance value rather than a real governance value, because I don't see any difference in the kind of governance that has happened since caste census has been released in Bihar. We have not seen the kind of developments or any kind of a particular policy from the champion Nitish Kumar as such. He has been doing a great job before that, and he has been doing the same job after that also. So I feel that it is more political, and it has a certain nuisance value. That is what I would say.
Madhavan Narayan, would you agree with this view that the BJP was always in favor or always amenable to the concept of a caste census, and the only thing that's been stopping the BJP so far on a central level from doing so are the logistical constraints, which, let's be honest, are quite formidable?
Well, I am a personal witness, I would say, to history, Ritangshu. I have actively covered the so-called Mandal period of politics in India between 1990. I'll give you the exact date. 7th of August 1990 was when Prime Minister VP Singh implemented the Mandal Commission report, which assured job preservation quotas for other backward castes. But let me point out several things there. First of all, the Constitution talks about other backward classes, and caste is implied or imperative, but it's been left a little open because that is the nature of the beast. Second thing, it's important to understand that the Constitution of India promises political and social justice. Now, this whole word politicization being used in a negative connotation is fundamentally flawed constitutionally. There's nothing wrong with politics. There's nothing wrong with politicization. Politicization exists essentially to bring justice, which is social, economic, or political. So therefore, this whole superficial middle-class drawing room idea that politicization is bad should be forthwith disbanded. A third thing I want to say is that both BJP and Congress also was essentially fighting against any kind of reservation. Although they were not public about it, they were muted about it. But I have personally visited, Fatehpur, from where VP Singh contested. I've gone through the length and breadth of UP. I have to say a lot on this subject. So caste census is something that did not suit Congress at that time. BJP was muted, but it was focusing a lot. There is this widespread impression that the Ram Janambhoomi, the VP Singh government fell on the Ram Janambhoomi issue essentially because he implemented the Mandal Commission report on the OBCs. It was a retaliation, political counter to that. Congress, on the other hand, was very busy campaigning against VP Singh, and They were muted in the official words, but at the grassroots level, the entire anti-Mandal agitation it's an open secret, was substantially supported by Congress. So that history must be kept in mind. And therefore, what we need to understand is caste is very much political an issue. There is nothing wrong with it. Let me quote Winston Churchill, who once said the answer to problems created by democracy is more democracy. And therefore, the answer created by the problem created by caste needs to be more caste, which is why we are now discussing sub-quotas within Dalits, sub-quotas, the EBCs, the OBCs, the MBCs, the most backward caste, the Mahadalits. So therefore, there seems to be a very interesting paradigm shift. The panelists before me spoke about growth and development. Now, growth and development comes from what in the US, in modern democracy, we call the affirmative action mindset. Whereas Rahul Gandhi's demand for caste census is now based on the diversity paradigm, which is about participation, not simply growth and development. It's about representationism as distinct from affirmative action. I don't know how many people even understand what I'm trying to say, because there is a huge philosophy behind diversity as well as affirmative action. They do have intersectionalities, but politically, affirmative action is one thing, diversity as a participation is another thing. And right now, the game is shifting to participation, in which you want everybody, whether it's women. So let me compare it with the US, where you have race and ethnicity, including Hispanics, and even sexual orientation increasingly becoming part of the diversity paradigm. Now, India is now taking caste to the next level. Now, one thing I noticed in what you said, Ritangshu, is that you completely use the word caste, but in social terms in India, the word community is often used. So are you talking about a community or a caste? Because I've traveled in UP, where people never say Jat, they always say Biradari.
Exactly.
So it's a complex intellectual challenge.
Yeah.
And, it's like artificial intelligence. It's not meant for everybody.
Which is why Mr. Narayan, one of the challenges we mentioned in my opening remarks is what exactly is a caste, and do we have a pan-India understanding of what defines a caste and what defines a sub-caste? That's a challenge which the British faced way back in I'll just come to you, Madhavan Narayan, that's because I also want to get in Pushparaj on this panel as well, on this discussion as well.
Let me have 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
I have to say this because this is extremely important, that in India, we have a poor intellectual perspective on caste. And I say this with full responsibility because everybody wants to use it only politically or discuss it socially. Actually, there are biological perspectives, there are psychological perspectives. So there are various ways you can look at caste and community, which is why we need a rigorous examination of the concept of caste.
Okay, let me go across to Pushparaj Deshpande, spokesperson of the Congress. Pushparaj, the criticism that has come in from the BJP and supporters of the BJP that the only reason the Congress party is interested in pushing for a caste census is because it wants to, A, counter the Hindutva mobilization happening from the BJP, and B, it essentially wants to create a political issue where there is further fragmentation and further polarization on the basis of caste here. There is no real development or near real action that we see once the caste census is out based on what we have seen in Karnataka so far. Why exactly then is the Congress party, specifically Mr. Rahul Gandhi, so insistent on the need for a caste census?
Hi, Ritangshu. Thank you for having me on your show, and congratulations on a very informative introduction. I really enjoyed it. And a very good evening to our panelists and viewers. See, firstly, India's founders forged the constitution to serve as a silver bullet against the graded inequalities of the past, which included casteism and communalism. It worked to some extent, but unfortunately, those social ills continue to be pervasive even today, which is why the Congress party believes that we need a caste census so we can recalibrate our social justice paradigm. Policies and governments are meant to be dynamic, not stagnant, unless, of course, you're in the BJP. Secondly, with regard to this entire debate, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If the BJP government conducts the caste census, which is a big if, given the government hasn't formally announced it or discussed it in Parliament, it would represent the India alliances and specifically leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi's victory. Because the BJP government first declined to conduct the caste census in an affidavit and filed in the Supreme Court on September 23, 2021. Then again in Parliament on 3rd August 23, And then the BJP government handcuffed state governments from conducting caste-based surveys. This is on August 3, 2023, MOS Nityanand Rai for Home Affairs at that time. Now, this turnaround would be even more remarkable because Prime Minister Modi himself has calibrated the caste census as an attempt to divide the country. But think about the normative shift this signals, because the Sangh Parivar is quietly burying two of its central policy planks that it has upheld for 3 decades, namely that of Samajik Samrasta and Satta, Sampatti and Sabman as vehicles of OBC empowerment. This U-turn is very telling. Now, the larger point is, with the substantive point here is, simply adding a column for enumerating the OBC caste in the infinitely delayed census is not what we are asking for. I mean, I'm very tempted to comment on how the census has been delayed for the first time in 100 years, but I will not deviate from the topic. We are asking for the enumeration of all castes, not just SC/STs, which was already being done, but also OBCs, DNT-NTs, and all general castes. We are demanding for a comprehensive caste census, not a moth-eaten partial caste census that the BJP is proposing. Why? Because only when we do a paranomic societal X-ray can we determine where structural fault lines are. The caste census is not just meant to know what the SC/ST and OBC population is, but to also understand what their socio-economic position is vis-a-vis general caste, and of course their education and employment status. Without a yardstick, how do you measure what the gaps are and how we address them? This becomes even more essential, as you said, Ritangshu, because the courts have been repeatedly asking for empirical data on caste for implementing OBC reservations in local bodies, for quota and decisions in government employment, and for various commissions. And finally, the one last point. Only when we map the socio-economic positions of all castes can we further customize and deepen India's welfare schemes for the well-being of general castes. I mean, why should they be deprived of target efforts to plug shortfalls of Roti Kapra Makan or Sadak Bijli Pani or Jaan Jahan Jivika? Long story short, if Prime Minister Modi genuinely believes in Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, then, as you said, it is morally incumbent on him to allow the caste census, because by not doing so, not only would he be violating his own promise to the nation, but also shortchanging 80 to 85% of India's population. Back to you, Ritangshu.
Okay. Now, Pushparaj, you mentioned about the fact that the Union government in 2022 or 2023 said that they were not in favor of a caste census, which is why it will be a U-turn. I'm interested in the U-turn by the Congress party. I have dates of 3 surveys which the Congress party has released in its history. In 1953, Mr. was set up under Pandit Nehru. In 1955, submitted a report. The commission submitted a report, no action. There was one submitted in 1980 by the Morarji government, said Mandal Commission, which proposed 27% quota. Indira and Rajiv Gandhi did not heed on it. Then in 2011, the UPA too had commissioned the first caste census in 1947. However, that data was not released for as long as Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was in power. In fact, there is a debate from Parliament archives in 2011 where then Home Minister P. Chidambaram questions the fact that the word he used is vexed. There are several vexatious questions about what exactly is the definition of a caste and what is a caste, what is a subcaste, which is why it is humongously impossible to carry out. The question then is that if you're calling for a complete paradigm understanding of the socio-economic caste fault lines, which is why you're calling for all castes to be mentioned in the census, why did the Congress government never initiate it seriously, or even when they did come up with half-hearted reports, they never took it the full mile?
That's a very good question, legitimate question. As I said, policies and governments are always meant to be dynamic, not stagnant. At the time, in the 50s, in the 60s, it was felt that the constitutional idea of India and the social justice paradigm enshrined in the constitution would be sufficient to address caste-based discrimination and casteism. That, of course, worked to some extent. But as you have seen, recent data, it has not been able to sufficiently address caste and caste-based discrimination, which is why there is a need to rethink policies and think of something, a new generation of social justice, a second generation social justice revolution. That is why we are even talking about a caste census. You're right. Number of governments
But
did
then,
conduct
Pushparaj, the same defense can also be made. The same defense can also be given to the Modi government that their policies are evolving, which is why perhaps maybe a few years ago they did not feel the need for a caste census, and now they do feel so. So I don't understand why it is a matter of shame for the Modi government to come make a U-turn now, whereas it's not that for the Congress party. Let me then get in Manish Barriar on this, because we don't have a lot of time. Mr. Barriar, the point that the Congress spokesperson has mentioned is that there's no point having a half-hearted, just having a column on OBC along with a column on SC and ST. The counterpoint to that being that since we only have quotas for OBCs under the Mandal Commission, it makes sense to only understand, get the data for the OBCs. We do not need a caste-based system. how does the BJP, how should the government respond to this demand coming in? Is there merit that if you have to go through the caste spectrum, do it properly, understand exactly which caste is represented how in terms of literacy, in terms of representation, in terms of across state barriers, across linguistic barriers, do the entire exercise if you're doing it for the first time in a century?
No, if you look at the caste census, it does gather a lot of economic data too. So I think his concerns would be well addressed in this caste census, if at all it comes in the way we are discussing. Having said that,
Which caste census are you talking about? The one that happened till 2011, because we haven't had a census. You are referring to the census till 2011, right?
If you look at the the data which is coming out, or the things that are coming out for this caste census, you can look at the questionnaire. Right, it is available publicly, and you would see a number of columns that does really address his concerns. But I would also say that if he's so concerned, Karnataka should have actually taken the lead, and we don't see Himachal and Karnataka actually taking the lead the way Bihar government took the lead during its time. So he has to really, the Congress party has to walk the talk, because it's very easy to throw questions, ask questions, but when it comes to your own party, then you do not really follow it. So that really tells the story whether the intent is correct or not, or is it just some words thrown here and there, and whether there is a honesty in their words or not. And I rest assured that this census would be very, very comprehensive. It is always very comprehensive. You look at the census data, and it will throw a lot of results which would help in ensuring that the other classes, the OBC as well as the other ones, they are suitably politically as well as economically empowered. I'm sure about it.
Okay. So let me then go across to Madhavan Narayanan. Mr. Narayanan, you mentioned in your opening remarks that too much democracy, the problems of democracy can only be countered by more democracy, which reminded me of a senior quote once of a government official in which he had mentioned too much democracy. Similarly, there's this quote of too much politics here. I'll come to you, Pushparaj, also for the last word. But Madhavan, the point is that we have not had a census for 13 years, but we do have had data, for instance, in terms of how population of Hindus have grown versus populations of Muslims have grown. And all that we have seen coming out of that is vitriolic discourse about how one community is producing more babies, one community is in threat of being dying out here. Isn't there a legitimate fear that the more we go down the caste rabbit hole, the further we'll come from the actual, one would say, ideal Ambedkarite goal of eventually doing away with reservations by finally creating a level playing field? Instead, you're making the playing field more and more complicated by giving individual handouts to every different person of different section of the society.
Your question deserves a book which I'm capable of writing, Ritangshu, but let me put it all in 3 sentences if I can. First is that, let me quote Napoleon. Churchill said the answer to problem created by democracy is more democracy, whereas Napoleon said we need a war to end all wars. So maybe we need a caste census to end all future censuses. And for this, my recommendation, nobody's going to listen to me right now, but they will someday, I know. I'm guilty of being ahead of the times. The point is that in the US, for instance, we have something called the Pew Research, which does, they go to a Christian and say, do you identify as Christian? So it's not just about what others see it, but also about how you feel it. So there is some kind of a referendum needed with an identification paradigm so that we know not just about who is counted as X caste or Y, but also how they feel about it. Because I say that Indians are very hypocritical. When it comes to marriage, they are upper caste. When it comes to jobs, they are backward caste because they want to be socially upwardly mobile. The third thing is that we need to actually get into the business of understanding caste by first, you cannot do surgery without touching the part which needs surgery. So caste is the fact of life in India. We need to touch it. But there are very interesting thoughts about Sanskritization, which is a word that everybody should Google if you want to really understand caste. A lot of castes want even demotion or promotion. In Tamil Nadu, there is a caste called Devendra Kulatta. They were Dalit. They say we now want to be classified as OBCs. So people talk about caste even like promotions in government jobs. So we need the last point I want to make is this problem will not be solved by politicians. This has to be solved by academicians and journalists and other independent thinking people. We need a philosophy around it, which current politicians are incapable of or do not talk. But having said that, I was quite impressed by what Pushparaj said. Yeah.
You are putting in a lot of faith in journalists, I can say, as an academician, as a journalist
I'm
myself.
old school. I'm
putting
old
a lot
school.
if I have 10 seconds to just hear from Pushparaj's point, if I just have 10 seconds to hear what Pushparaj had to say. Pushparaj, knowledge is just part of it. What matters is action. Where do we act?
Ritangshu, very quickly, the Karnataka government, the Chhattisgarh government, the Maharashtra government under MVA and the Bihar Mahagathbandhan government had all conducted caste surveys. But the BJP government in Parliament in 2022 said that they will not allow states to do caste-based census. The Nityanand Rai, the MOS for Home Affairs, said that they will not allow the census to shift from the concurrent list to the union list, which would have allowed state governments to conduct caste census.
But again, Pushparaj, the question remains, what could you have done in the states you were in?
That is, we were all in state government here.
All right, Pushparaj, I'm being told to wind up here. Okay. So again, the point still remains, caste is a reality. Perhaps getting a caste census is the best way to understand the contours of the reality. But then what next? This debate cannot be concluded successfully without also pondering what next has to be done in order to ensure that everyone comes onto a level playing field. Pushparaj Deshpande, Madhavan Narayanan and Manish Barriar, thank you so much. And thank you, our dear viewers, for joining us on Beyond the Headlines.